Inner Quest explores various pathways through which you can connect with the infinite wisdom of the universe and apply it to personal, professional, and spiritual growth. This program, featuring accomplished practitioners, educators, and authors, is provided by Infinity Foundation, an innovative center for holistic studies and research. We invite you to share this journey with us.
Hello, welcome to Inner Quest. My name is Jay Stone, your host for today, and our guest is Jill Angelo. Welcome, Jill.
Hi, thank you very much.
Jill is the author of Sacred Space, Turning Your Home into a Sanctuary. So if you want to have a more peaceful, calmer, more loving residence, stay tuned. Actually, a better life, I guess, what I get from looking over your book. Let me tell you a little bit about Jill. Jill spent 2 decades in business management before changing her life's direction to pursue an inner calling. In the years since, she has traveled extensively, studying and working with a number of spiritual self-help authors, including Caroline Myss, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Harvey, Matthew Fox, and Mona Lisa Schultz. Well, why don't you start by telling our audience what you mean by a sacred space?
Sacred space, in my definition and how I approach it with people, is a calm, nurturing, relaxing environment that is reflective of your personal style. It's not created through a catalog necessarily. There might be pieces that you see in a catalog that speak to you, but it's something that's created based on you and what calls to you.
And so, do you do like individual consulting or teach classes?
I do both.
Okay. So, what kind of changes do you see in a person's home after they consult with you or take your class? You know, can you elaborate on that?
One of the things that's most easy to see is the overall energy of the person who owns the home or the workspace that we worked in. They feel calmer, they have more energy, they're more joyful. They don't live in as much chaos. They've gotten rid of the clutter. And that opens up space to allow for, as many have said, more to come in, or gives people an opening for more creation of themselves. So their workspace, they may become more productive. At home, they're more relaxed.
And so, does this change the relationship or improve the relationships that people living in the house, let's say a husband and a wife, or boyfriend and girlfriend, or parents and children?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I
have seen that.
Okay, tell us more.
I have seen that. I think that when families focus on specific rooms, ideally children, especially right now with children being back in school, all summer they've lived one life where they've been free-spirited, they've gone to the pool, they've had later curfews, etc. And now we're getting back into the school structure where you're going to come home and you're going to focus on schoolwork and chores and showering before bed and reading and what have you. When you shift the environment to allow for that to occur, it brings more structure, and that allows for more calm. And that affects everyone in the house.
And also establish a routine, which is important with children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. As well as the parents. As well as the parents.
And do you have any tips for parents?
One of the things that I think is most important is that clutter is eliminated as much as possible. And I realize that that's difficult, especially in a high-functioning, high-energied house. Yet, there's too many organizational companies that's out there. There's too many opportunities for creation in catalog shopping if you can't go out and purchase it, so that everything has its own space. Because if you keep maintaining that as you move along, that creates a better energetic field in the home, and it's a happier environment instead of having to run around looking for things all the time.
Now, I've heard parents say, you know, I buy these toys, they use them once, or they're interested a few weeks, and they'll use them again. Do you tell parents just don't buy these things because it's going to cause clutter, or just move them out?
I think basically most parents have a pretty general idea as to how long their child is going to stay involved with that particular toy. If after a few weeks into a few months they're not, then my suggestion would be to either give it away, pass it along, ask the child again, of course, based on their age, do you really want this? Involve the child to make the decision who to give it to and where to pass it to.
Okay.
But there's no sense in really hanging on to things if you're not going to use it.
I like the idea involving the child.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so how else can children get involved in creating a sacred space? Do you want children involved in like creating a sacred space for their bedroom or den, etc.?
Absolutely, because I think that when children build or create their own type of sacred space, the importance is they learn how to spend time in that space just being versus being occupied and being on an iPad or their computer or their phone, because we're in such a technological world now. When you're in a position to just be in a room and have music playing, or not even on the iPad, if some houses have overhead, sometimes it's just pure quiet. Most children don't know how to do that any longer.
Oh, I'm kind of smiling and laughing because when you said that, just being, it reminds me of a story I was with my niece, and we were at the hospital, and we went walking, and we found an atrium, and I said, well, let's just sit here and be. And she looked at me in the cutest voice. She says, I don't know how to be. And so we just sat, and absorbed the sun,
Right.
The flowers, the birds, the water, the waterfall, etc.
And those are the things that many children have done but don't necessarily know what it means. And when you experience that and you show them what it means, they often want more.
Okay. Now, is your sacred space religious?
It doesn't have to be. For some it is. For me personally, mine is. But it doesn't have to be for all.
And so how do people incorporate their religion in their sacred space?
Well, for instance, in some of the travels that I've had, using myself as an example, I've been raised Catholic, and I've had the experience of traveling. So I've experienced being in India and seeing how Hindu live and what their experience is. I've been exposed to Buddhism. So I have different statues and deities from when I've traveled that I've brought back, and I've incorporated them into my sacred space because I remember what it was like to be in a Buddhist temple and how wonderful that experience was. So I have a few Buddhas around the house that bring me back to that moment and of remembrance, and I always want to have that around me.
And what about anything from your Catholic background?
My Catholic background, believe it or not, on the back of my bed I have rosaries that I've also collected when I've traveled because I think there's such incredible pieces. One of my absolute favorite pieces is a rosary that I got in Assisi because I rescue animals, and so I have St. Francis around the house for that reason as well.
And before the show you told me you've rescued 4 dogs and a cat.
I have.
And is it possible to create sacred space for animals?
I think that in truth mine do live that way. Believe it or not, they are a pack. They all will have their moments where they're separated, but for most time when we're in my office where I work all day, all of them lay on a floor and a carpet in front of me together where they're touching one another, and they'll spend hours that way. It's very calm. They have their own areas that are theirs for sleeping, but most of the time they all make themselves back to one another, and they're always usually touching at that point when they're sleeping. So I would say yes. But I think a lot of that is based on the environment that I've created for myself and how I live, and it's that trickle-down effect and how it could create for them.
Okay. And so how does a sacred space appear in your life or someone else's life?
I think one of the most important pieces is if I were to walk into your home. When I first walked in, I would do an overall just deep breath, inhale, exhale. How did I feel when I walked in? Did I feel calm or did I feel chaos? Because all of us have homes of people that we know where, for instance, Susie's having a party and we all get excited because we can't wait to go by Susie's house because we always have this great time. And then we could think about having to go by John's house, and sometimes we don't want to ever go to John's house because we know what it's like to be in John's house. So it's one of those identifiable things that whether we subconsciously or consciously are aware, we feel. And so as we would walk through your home, I would want to walk in each room and ask you, how do you feel in this room? What calls to you in here? Tell me about this or that. Why is it here? And you'd be amazed at the amount of people's homes I've been in where they can't explain. It was my grandmother's, or they'll shake it off. There's an obligation to have things. Someone passed away. They feel that obligation to have it even though they really don't want it there. Or the offices that you can go in and there's photos of the couple that's divorced, but they keep the photo because the kids are in it. Those are things that cause a friction. You're kind of going against the grind, and this is a place where you want to feel good about yourself. So we would continue through the rooms, and I would ask you to tell me the story. What do you like about this room? What don't you like about this room? Everything in it has a story, and I would want you to tell me the story, like you're doing with me.
Now, I noticed, like, your chapters, let's get started. And so getting started would be that walk through the room?
First, to get started, most importantly, if you're going to follow the outline of the book, you would need to journal. I think it's very important that you write down your thoughts and you write what comes to you, because the way that the book is set up, there's questions and there's 5 to 10 things that you can do right now. And then there's questions that I'll ask you about to journal. Like, for instance, if we were on color, I would want to know, why do you choose the colors that you wear? For instance, you're wearing purple today. How does purple make you feel? Why did you choose the color purple? And get into the depth of that. And then I would ask you, where is the purple in your home? Do you have it in your home? Is it your favorite color? And we would take it from there. So the first chapter is based on journaling and the importance of journaling. Even if it's a brief line or two, it's to write it down so you have something to reference.
Okay, and then you've got a chapter on sight, smell, sound, and touch. So you want to elaborate on those chapters?
Sight's very important, and in sight, one of the things that I do reference is the fact that every day I walk my dogs. And I make sure that when I walk the dogs, I walk without a phone, without earbuds, because I want to be aware of everything that I see around me. And it's interesting because if you take the same walk every day, which is something that I do with them, you see something new. And if I had those earbuds in, I may not be as focused. And it's to remember what's around me. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're not as aware until it's no longer there.
And what I find interesting is smell. Are there things that we can, smells like aromatherapy, we can add, or burning incense to a room to make it more sacred?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I encourage people to use as pure of a product as possible. Because the fabricated ones, while they smell lovely initially, they're not nearly as wonderful as a fresh lemon or fresh lemon essential oil versus a fabricated one that you can buy that's manufactured with all kinds of additional chemicals.
Yeah. What are they, the emulsifiers? What are they called?
I work with this. I work with essential oils, so I use diffusers.
Diffusers. Okay. Like you put a drop in a little water and you light a candle under that. Right. And they're not expensive.
Not at all. Not at all.
I received it as a gift. Now, sound. You know, I've had Richard Rudis as a guest. Are you familiar with him?
I know I'm not.
He's a Buddhist priest.
Okay.
And a very interesting guy, and he does gong baths.
Oh.
And yeah, you should check it out, or our audience should check out. But told an amazing story. He was in a helicopter in the Vietnam War, and they had just napalmed like this entire side of a mountain, and there was this one beautiful green lush place. He says, "What's that?" He says, "It's a Buddhist monastery." And that image stayed with him after the war, and it turned out to be his salvation. But anyway, so, you know, and I'm familiar with like a sound clearing. Can you elaborate on that?
Sound's important because, for me, using myself as an example, being that I work from home all day, I work in silence. And so when I hear, I have His Holiness as a chant that I'll listen to.
Dalai Lama?
Correct.
I have that too, and you can get it free on the internet.
Right, and it's such an amazing it's so amazing to hear that. And when you sit peacefully, to hear it resonate with you, where you can feel that energy through you. When you need to burn off and you want to do cardio, then you put on dance music. And not to be afraid to dance or to listen. And I also encourage people to listen to music that they've never heard. Some people are intimidated by chanting. Or when people who do yoga, Om. And how incredible that vibration of the Om is when you hold that in your body. How important that is, especially if you haven't experienced it, to have that opportunity.
Well, I have a home in nature in Wisconsin as well as resident in Chicago, so I'll just like listen to the birds or the frogs or the geese flying overhead.
I have some of that where I'm at, but for those that don't, and any opportunity anyone can get in nature, by far, you must.
Yeah, well, even, you know, if you live in the city, there's birds.
Sure.
There's birds chirping.
A little bit harder sometimes depending upon where you are, though, in that city.
Yeah, well, a lot of, you know, the traffic.
Correct. But you learn how to silence that other stuff out, and you can focus on them, which is highly important.
And so why is it so important to have a sacred space?
Because for me and for the people that I've worked with, it brings you back to center. It grounds you. For those that meditate prior to, or bring that and incorporate that into their daily routine, I think it's very important to come home to an environment that you want to, that you cannot wait to be to, that nurtures you, that's a safe haven. There's a lot of people out there who don't want to go home.
Yeah. And, well, you talked about like clutter with children. How important is cleanliness for our sacred space?
Highly. One of the things that I do recommend in the book that I think is very important is when people shower every day, as you're standing there, because in India, in the morning, people go for sunrise and they bathe in the Ganges River. And they offer the water in a ritual, and they offer it up to the sun and to God as they do that. So one of the recommendations that I make in the book is to do similar for yourself. As you bathe yourself, wash the day's troubles away. Wash anything bad that's come your way out and off of you. And as the water's coming through, welcome what's good coming in. And what joys that you have, and release what's not as good for you. And I think that that's a dual cleanse, not only literally, but on an emotional and on a spiritual level as well.
And, well, let me ask you this. Would you agree that sacred space is about elevating one's consciousness or experiencing higher consciousness?
I do, and I think that that comes as you graduate through and you learn more about yourself. You learn about more what comes to you on an energetic level. You learn more about what's drawn to you. Some people at a very basic level simply know, I don't like this and I don't like that, and that's fantastic. As you become more and more aware, yes, I do believe that your consciousness does grow.
Now, in your book, you talk about sight, sound, smell, and feel, but you don't talk about taste. At least I didn't see it as a separate chapter. How important, you know, is the kitchen and what's in the refrigerator and what's in the cupboards to sacred space?
One of the things that I focus on is altars. There's your spiritual altar, and then there's a practical altar. When you look at a practical altar, one of the examples that I do give is someone's kitchen, especially as someone who thoroughly enjoys to cook. If you've been at a dinner party where that person is entertaining, you'll see how they maneuver. You'll see the setup. They'll have multiple bottles of olive oil, multiple herbs and spices, multiple utensils. And there's a way that they move throughout the kitchen and they create that incredible meal that you have. And that's where it is important. They choose every vegetable with care. There's love in it. There's almost a hedonistic quality in the way that they do that to create that. So that, like anything else, is equally as of importance.
Okay. And so let's say somebody wanted to create, I think you said, a practical altar?
Yes.
What, you know, how big would the altar be, and can you give some examples of what would be on it?
Sure. Practical altars are in our everyday lives. Our desks become practical altars while we're at work with the way we have our altars set up. Our dressers become. Women who have vanities, or when we get ready in the morning and we put on our makeup, or gentlemen when they get out of the shower and they're preparing and how they shave, all of that becomes a form of a practical altar. Men who have man caves, or women who have creative areas, who like to scrapbook or sew, those areas become practical altars because they're putting their heart and their soul into what they're creating at that time. Spiritual altars that have more of that definition, those are ones where we have things such as candles, or we burn incense and we put intentions on there. We'll make offerings to them as Buddhists do. For instance, where I get my nails done, when I come in, they have incense sticks, they have coffee that they offer. Believe it or not, they have fresh fruit, they have flowers, and occasionally they offer donuts because the donut place is next door and they're offering something to their God at that time.
Now, I know a lot of religions use, let's say, wine as part of their spiritual practice. I know in Judaism, I can't speak for some other religions, but I also know there are monasteries that make beer, that make wine. Where does alcohol fit in the sacred space, or does it?
It's a very good question, and I thank you for it. In the experiences that I've had where I see it be incorporated in, I see it from the perspective of, for instance, the practical altar with someone who's had an incredible meal. I look at it in honoring ourselves and self-care. There's a lot of single people that are out there who like to microwave their dinners and eat at the counter instead of placing that meal on a plate, sitting at the table, allowing themselves to have that glass of wine or a beer to celebrate who they are. So I think it's important, of course, all in moderation, but I do think it's important to honor yourself and how you feel that's necessary.
Okay. So you're open to the idea as long as it's fitting with one's personal practice and beliefs.
Correct, and not obviously from an addictive perspective or an abuse in using it overly.
Okay, and what about like the changing of the seasons? You know, do the sacred space change, you know, let's say, you know, for a solstice or for fall and winter?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my home especially, or anyone else's, when you decorate for the holidays or you go through those seasonal changes, there's something that goes on internally with our internal clock. And we move forward. Like right now, we're all moving into fall. The leaves are changing. Pumpkins are coming out. For me, this is my absolute favorite time of year. And there's that cycle that we follow seasonally as well. It affects us in the way that we decorate our homes because we decorate for the holidays. It affects us for those who keep fresh flowers in the home on what we purchase. It affects us in the vegetables and the fruit and some of the food that we purchase as well. So it's always ever changing and moving at the same time.
Okay. All right. Does sacred space require a certain lifestyle or income level?
No, I think that's what the glory of it is. I think that's what the glory of it is.
Well, I would assume in your travels, like let's say through India, you know, where people would have poverty by our standards, but their home was very sacred. Very.
And I never really even considered it from the perspective monetarily whatsoever. It was how I felt when I was there, and how I was made to feel by being welcomed in.
And how did you get started with sacred space?
About 14 years ago, I went through a very big trauma, and I lost somebody who was very, very important to me in a car accident. And we had just bought our home, and we had many plans, like many people do. And we had dreams, hopes, and wishes, and that was going to be our future. And that obviously had left quite early. So being that I had just moved into the home that we had purchased, it became a journey of healing. And through that, I found my inner calling.
And do you have a place for this person in your home, or hold a sacred place in your house for this person?
I have different pieces from him that are throughout the house. That, believe it or not, when I travel, one of the most important things that I have is a stone that I take back from where I've been. And we had traveled some together. So throughout my home, you'll find stones either outside or inside. And I have stones that were part of my life with him that are always those lovely remembrances.
And I wish you would have brought some of those stones. That would have been wonderful, you know. And like, where are some of the places you brought stones back from?
Well, believe it or not, we spent time in Florida, and we traveled throughout the Midwest, so I have them from the Midwest areas. In my other travels throughout the world. I've spent a decent amount of time in South Africa, so I have a number from South Africa.
Is there a particular reason why you spend a lot of time in South Africa?
In my creative resourcing side of my job, which is similar to PR, one of the authors that I represent is in South Africa, and I take tours down to visit her on a lion sanctuary in South Africa. So we stay on a lion sanctuary reserve.
Oh.
And I've been there 5 times.
So she rescues lions.
Right, white lions, in fact. White lions, in fact. So when I'm on those grounds, I have some stones from being on that land.
Yeah, and you talked about how inexpensive it is to create a sacred space.
Correct.
Stones are, they're free.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
Now, I do make an offering back for receiving, because after being around a few Native Americans, they're about giving and taking from the earth, and Native Americans will often either offer a piece of their hair or they'll offer tobacco, which is one of the most sacred things that Native Americans had. So I've learned how to give my offering back. So if I take, I make sure I give. Same thing if we're cutting down trees, we should be replanting trees when we're building or making paper.
Okay. Now, can you tell our audience how homes reflect a person's lifestyle?
I think that in my experiences of what I've seen, oftentimes when you walk into a house that has that very chaotic feeling, if you were to explore it a little bit further, that chaos is seen in other avenues. Their car might be very messy. Their desk at work might be very messy. They may be running around and always, not necessarily always, but occasionally late. They may not want to make their bed. And so those are things that are reflective of people that are hurried, rushed, too many things going on at one time.
So the outside is a manifestation or reflection of what's
Correct.
going on in the
Correct.
inside.
And that can happen often, just in everyday life. Right? We sign our kids up for 4 after-school programs instead of maybe 1 or 2. It's those kinds of things that when everybody just takes the deep breath and pause and comes back to center and realizes where it all stems from, that opportunity to come back to center is always there.
Yeah, we're kind of running out of time.
Sure.
But can you tell our audience about how much time a person needs to put in each day to maintain his or her sacred space?
I think it's important that people start every day, even if it's only for 5 minutes, graduating up to 15. The norm is somewhere in there. Even people who teach meditation will tell you, do it for 5, graduate to 15. Once you get in that realm, it's easy to graduate even further and take up to an hour if necessary.
Can you give an example how you would spend your 10, 15 minutes a day or more, I would assume?
Sure.
Maintaining your sacred space?
I get out of bed. And when I'm out of bed in the morning, I have my gratitude that I have for what surrounds me and the fact that I'm healthy, my boyfriend, my family, my life, my animals. I give gratitude for that. I take pause and go about my daily routine of showering and getting ready, the rituals that all of us have. And I'm consciously aware of what I'm doing, not half asleep of what I'm doing. And when we're aware of what's going on, it makes it easier for gratitude.
All right. Jill, I'd love to hear more, but we're out of time.
Sure.
For more information about Jill, Angelo, Infinity Foundation, InnerQuest Talk Show, stay tuned to the credits at the end. Until next time, wish you good health, good spirits, and good fortune. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you very much.
Infinity Foundation or any of our visit our website infinityfoundation.org or call us at 847-831-8828.